And what was really interesting, this is what my son said to me. And he said to me, this was about 4 years ago, and he said to me, Dad, I'm not like your generation who accepted everything your colonial masters told you.
Woo!
That's when I woke up. That's when I woke up, brother.
Showtime.
Living a dream, living the African dream.
Welcome to Pan African Lifestyle, the ultimate Pan African hub. I am your host, Harrison Paul, and we post here regularly. So please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to stay connected. If you're a pal, short for Pan African Lifestyler, welcome back to the tribe. Today we have a very special guest. In fact, we have the first ever guest on this show, Benjamin Bankole Bello. You got to get that right, Bankole. Benjamin Bankole Bello is a British-born Nigerian comedian, storyteller, and cultural critic whose creation, President Obonjo of Lafta Republic, transcends comedy. Born during a time of personal transition, Obonjo became more than just a satirical voice. He evolved into a vessel for Pan-African reflection, social critique, and an unapologetic truth-telling. What started in 2011 grew into a cultural movement that earned Benjamin the Malcolm Hardee Award for Comic Originality in 2019, an accolade shared by global comedic icons like Trevor Noah. Through his work, Benjamin bridges art and activism, humor and history, reminding us that the fight for Africa's dignity and unity is still unfinished business. Benjamin Bankole Bello, welcome to Pan-African Lifestyle, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm so impressed that you were able to pronounce my middle name properly.
Well, I am an African, so I should, despite you being from Nigeria, you're Nigerian, right?
Yes, I am. I am Nigerian. I am Nigerian.
Yes, so despite us, I need to get better at pronouncing, we all have to get better at pronouncing, our brothers and sisters' name from different parts of the
Yeah.
continent.
Yeah.
But look, we really want to figure out, how did you, as a storyteller, as a journalist, how did you come up with this character? Like, where did it start?
So there's a history behind the character President Obonjo.
Right.
So let me start by saying that I was born in Liverpool. Okay, so I spent 5 years in Liverpool before going back to Nigeria and spending 19 years in Nigeria and then coming back to the UK in the 80s.
Right.
And I didn't realize the impact of that change. I had no choice. It wasn't my decision at the age of 5 to go back to Nigeria, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I spent so many years, and it wasn't my choice to come to England. However, what I didn't realize was the impact of moving from one country to the other.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So
Yes,
when I was in
definitely.
Liverpool, I can't remember because I couldn't really remember Liverpool, to be honest with you. But what I do remember is when I arrived in Nigeria, they treated me like, how would I put it? Almost like, they dressed me up in the Beatles outfit, and I
Yes.
arrived, and I arrived in Nigeria. So you can imagine how my uncles and aunties and people that were family members, they just saw me as, this white boy, if that makes sense,
There you go.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so it was ingrained in me at a very early age that, I needed to address who I was in terms of my identity so I don't get
Mm,
lost, if that makes sense. So
mm,
back in Nigeria, being treated as not Nigerian, but as a British person, and then coming to England and being
mm,
reminded that you were black, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah.
And along that line, I noticed some changes in terms of how I spoke. I noticed some changes in my behavior. And at one point I just thought, wow, there's something going on here. Uh,
Mm,
and in 19, trying to remember now, I think probably 13 years ago
mm,
or 14 years ago, Obama came into the scene. You
right.
remember President Obama, yeah?
Definitely.
And he became the first black president of the United States.
Right.
At the time, I was playing around on Facebook and all the social media platforms at the time, and just playing around with the fact that I had created this character called President Obonjo, not
Right.
knowing that in my subconscious mind, I wanted to get back to what I believe was African. I wanted to
Right.
get back to the fact that I'd had enough of Western influence. And
Wow.
actually, I'm Nigerian. I am a Nigerian man,
Right.
even though I'm living in England. But if you remember, Obama came into the scene, and I don't know how old you were then. It doesn't really matter. But for me, it made me reflect that, wow, I could also become president. I
Wow.
could also become
Yes.
president.
Yes.
If he could
Yes.
become
Yes.
president, I could. So it really
Yes.
inspired me. But
Yes.
what really happened was my wife was supporting Hillary Clinton. I was supporting Obama.
Okay.
As soon as Obama becomes president, it's as if my wife was just in love with Obama. Obama this, Obama that in the house, Obama this. And it made me reflect and it just made me think, I think I think this woman wants a president in the house. She really she wants a president. And during the Obama, the first 4 years
So
of Obama,
selfless.
yeah. So I was mimicking Obama, but not in uniform, but because Obonjo sounds like Obama. So
Right.
the real inspiration was Obama. However, if you remember, Obama had a tough time as president because the
Yes.
Republicans just didn't want him to succeed. And if
Yes.
you remember, I believe, yes, he had that phrase, "Yes, we can," and after that phrase, "Yes, we can," and he was finding it difficult. He then decided it was yes, but we can. And I just
Mm.
thought, if I was Obama, and considering that he was half Kenyan, what would he do? He will act like a Pan-African president. He
Right.
will. You see all this. Well, with red states and blue states, there's no blue states, all that stuff.
Right.
He will
Right.
just forget and behave like a Pan African
There you
president,
go. There
which
you
is
go.
where I think he made a mistake was running when he was running America. So I just thought,
Yes.
actually, and also to explain as well, I lived in Nigeria during dictatorship rule. So my
Right.
understanding of leadership, yeah, is you have to be in uniform for you to run a country. You have to be disciplined. And the politicians were not disciplined enough to move a country forward. But you're similar to Kemi Badenoch, who's affected by dictatorship in Nigeria. I was also affected by dictatorship in Nigeria. And that's why
Right.
Obonjo was created in uniform. I just decided, look, I'm changing from a civilian to becoming uh, a military president. Long before Ibrahim Traore, long before all these Western African uh, presidents that you see right now,
Right.
President Obonjo was created long before them. So there's a bit of influence there. So that's how it all happened. It was all because of Obama, all because Obama failed his presidency. And I was thinking, wow, if Obama was a Pan-African president, do you understand what I'm saying? Because lots of people were looking.
I 100% understand what you're saying, and I really, really like it. And I really want to pivot into that right now because you just mentioned a big figure there at the moment, which is Kemi Badenoch, also a Nigerian lady.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure what your views are on her, but we know that she has very harsh views for Africans or Pan-Africanism of any sort. I just kind of feel that she doesn't necessarily, I want to say, from the pulpit anyway, show to be a Pan-Africanist. And I do feel often from that generation or anybody of that generation, I can pull up quotes where she kind of shows, anything got to do with colonialism is a scam. We should let it go, forget about it.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
usually the mindset of anybody of that generation. I think it was a put up and shut up type mentality that got driven into them so much that they eventually weren't able to even acknowledge their own scars, right? That came from colonialism.
Yeah. So we are. You're absolutely right. We are a victim of colonialism. There's no two ways
Right,
about it.
right,
I've got lots of stories to share. But let me just respond to the Kemi Badenoch thing. I'm not a fan of her politics. I don't like the way she criticizes Nigeria.
right,
Jokingly, I said on stage the other day, I said there are two types of people who have been affected by dictatorship. One is President Obonjo, who ends up wearing an army uniform to perform comedy. And the other person is you end up becoming the Tory leader and you deny your race. That's what dictatorship does to you. So,
right.
yeah, exactly. So, I'm not a fan of her politics. I don't like what she says. I don't like how she puts people down. But people will do what they need to do to get to where they need to get to. Okay, and I can't falter for that. However, I think people need to understand that when you get to that level, that you have that platform, you have a responsibility to your people, like it or not. You may
Thank
well
you,
not
Mr.
want
President.
to. You may well. I'm not Mr. President yet, but you may well not. You may well not want that level of responsibility. But hey, if you're black, yeah, the David Lamis of this world, the uh, who are the other MPs? Their name escapes my mind. That shows how impactful they've been.
There you go.
You have a responsibility to use your voice for your people. It doesn't matter whether you've moved from one country to the other. You have a responsibility, and that's what I've been trying to do with my comedy, True President Obonjo. I reflected on, because I've been doing the character for about 11 years, and I reflected on what is it I say to my people? What am I representing? What can I use as my platform to ensure that I'm connecting with people and I'm providing a voice for the voiceless?
Right.
And that's
Right.
where I
And
am
and
with
and,
my
and
comedy now.
and I think for me that's so powerful. And I just want to get to, how did you arrive there? Because that's the point I'm saying. Like you said, a wonderful joke. You can either become a Kemi Badenoch where you're putting down your people, or you become a president of Pan-Africanism like yourself. I want to know, because as someone who has a mother also who knew what it took for her to come out of that mindset and to want to fight and be, a voice for African people, and just kind of like what it takes when you come from that generation, which you come from. What inspired that? Because that is something that most of us, they don't take that path so quickly.
So a couple of things. One is, and I think it's very, very difficult. I woke up when my son spoke to me. I have a 21-year-old son who's in university, and at one point he was wearing dreadlocks. He had dreadlocks on, and I'm sure you know that African parents are not into dreadlocks.
Thank you, sir.
And I had two choices at the time when I saw him. I mean, real dreadlocks with Bonner Boy and all that stuff, and I just thought, with the Bonner Boy hairstyle, and I just thought I had two choices: either to start challenging him and saying, why you wear, you're not a Jamaican, you're not, why are you doing that? Yeah, because that, look, don't fault me for that. That's just part of how I felt at the time.
100%.
Yeah, look, you're an African. Why do you have dreadlocks on? What's this all about? And what was really interesting, this is what my son said to me. And he said to me, this was about 4 years ago, and he said to me, Dad, I'm not like your generation who accepted everything your colonial masters told you.
Woo!
That's when I woke up. That's when I woke
Showtime.
up. That's when I woke up. That's when I woke up. When he said to me, my hair is a statement.
Wow.
It is a political statement.
Wow.
And I don't care if anyone accepts it or not. This is who I am. And yeah,
wow.
that was powerful, because I remember when I was growing up in Nigeria, we weren't listening to Afrobeats. We were listening to Michael Jackson. We were listening to all these R&B.
Right.
Brother, I had Jerry coils on. I wanted to be the next Michael Jackson. I had Jerry coils.
Then we all burned our scalp with hair relaxers.
Jerry coils on. I didn't realize that a couple of weeks later, you had to go back to the saloon to get it fixed. Now, this is what I'm saying to you. It was a different generation, a different approach entirely. We were brought up speaking English. I couldn't even speak vernacular, which is Pidgin English. Even my Yoruba language. Yet my father didn't want me to speak those sort of languages at home. Yeah, you would have heard of Fela, you would have heard of Bonner Boy and how they sing their songs. We were not allowed. We were brought up. I certainly was brought up like a middle class English eating.
Right.
Yeah, back in Nigeria. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So
quite like Kemi, I think.
Yeah. No, well, not as bad as Kemi. Not as bad as Kemi, but there were quite a few of us who were raised in that way, in the
Right.
English way. I went
Right.
to one of the best secondary schools in Nigeria at the time. The boarding schools were named after English teachers rather than
Right.
African teachers. Do you understand what I'm saying? You
Right.
know, we were taught uh, English, English literature, rather than the Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, and all
Yes.
these other things that
Yes. Yes.
do you understand what I'm
Yes.
saying? So that, in a way, that conversation with my son, I will never ever forget it.
Wow.
Woke me up. That's the first point. The second point was the George Floyd thing. Remember when the
Right.
George Floyd thing
Oh,
happened? Okay,
that did for me as well, sir.
and there were just lots of um, conferences and seminars, and they were looking for black
Right.
leaders to go and talk. And I live in a white neighborhood in England,
Right.
okay, and there's nothing wrong in living in a white neighborhood. I used to live in a black neighborhood, and I now live in a white neighborhood. And they were looking for black leaders who would address the impact of the George Floyd and what needed to happen to make sure society changed. So I went on stage and I spoke as myself, and I couldn't believe the impact I had, not just on the community, but my children also talking to me, say, Dad, I've never ever seen you talk
Wow.
like that.
Wow.
It was powerful. So
Wow.
it just made me realize that I needed to think about what I said on stage, because there are people listening to me, watching me. I have a
Wow.
platform, and
Wow.
I have to take responsibility. And I don't want to be like my parents who were so English in their approach, even
Wow.
though, you
Wow.
understand what I'm saying? So
Yes, sir.
my name is, but my original name is, when I say original name, my Nigerian name is Bankole Bello. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times I question, why did my father call me Benjamin? And at one
Mm-hmm.
point I wasn't using Bankole. When I arrived in England, I said, yes, I'm putting Benjamin Bankole Bello.
Wow.
And you better pronounce it, the three B's. You better be able to pronounce it properly.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's no coincidence that I ended up creating a character that was African. It's no coincidence that this was my own way of just getting back to my identity. I wasn't lost.
Yes.
It's the journey that we
Yes.
all have to go through. Do you understand what I'm
Right.
saying? And some
Yes.
of us would discover it and wake up, and some of us wouldn't. But I got to a stage where I thought, after that discussion with my son, George Floyd, and so many other things that I've experienced in Britain, that we all have a responsibility. You don't have to be in power, because I think
Right.
I've proven that you don't have to be in power, to influence and to let
Right.
people know
Right.
what's important in society.
Wow. That's really blown me away. And sir, when we're talking about, I keep hearing that quote you just said about, how your son reminded you about the colonialism and how powerful that is. And
Yeah,
it brings me to how, you've gone into museums and
yeah,
turned, British museums into stages,
yeah,
and brought about, actually challenging the history behind that.
yeah.
But the question I actually want to ask to you then, do you think Africa, especially the African diaspora, truly understand the depth of what has been stolen from us? That's physically and that's even psychologically. So even something like yourself there, the identity in regards to your father, in regards to hairstyles, do you think specifically your generation, do they understand the depth of what was stolen from us?
I don't think I would definitely say that I didn't know the depth of erasure from history
Right.
until I left Nigeria.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all this stuff about the black. So for example, when I arrived in England, and I kept hearing about Black History Month. There's no Black History Month in Nigeria.
Right.
I'm thinking, what do you need Black History Month for?
Right.
It was when I started attending those events that I realized, wow, there's so much that we haven't been told. Because don't forget, like I said, so that I can speak for myself, a lot of people in my generation were raised as English people.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yes.
Black History Month in Nigeria, you're joking. But when I
Mm.
started attending these events and I started meeting different types of Black people in the UK, it woke me up. It woke me up. When I arrived and people were telling me about racism, I had no idea what that was until I experienced it myself. And then I started hearing stories. So I would say it's two answers for you. Certainly my generation, unless you studied history, unless you went to university and you had your history degree, you will understand the impact. Yeah. But the younger generation, the likes of you, for one reason or the other, something was woken you guys up. You are more, you're woken up more than we are. So you're fully aware and very, very aware of what that impact is. And yeah, it's almost similar to, I got really offended this week. Pope, as you know, Pope Francis has died. And everybody was writing, oh, there's going to be the first black Pope. Hello? There have been 3 black popes.
Wow.
3 black popes. And nobody's talking about that.
Wow.
Because so I'm asking, have they erased the history? They erased the history that people don't know that there has been a black pope, 3 black popes from Africa.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, it's a minefield. I just hope that, you know, black people will you have to think about the likes of Gaddafi. You have to think of the likes of Idi Amin, Dada. The history is there. The history is there about Pan-Africanism, and people just need to go back to their roots. And I think it's not too late. It's never too late. It wasn't too late for me.
It's never too late, sir.
It's never too late. The worst sin is you knowing about it and not educating yourself, and then using your platform to educate others.
And that's what I'm going to get to next. So, you know, it's about us sharing that, you know, because I'm sure all of us got that awakening moment. Of course, you got it from your son, but it wasn't only with your son. It was that time where you stumbled across a video and someone might have been breaking down racism, or someone may have been breaking down African consciousness. And even it could be someone stumbling across your video and enjoying that. And for you, satire has been the greatest tool. Why do you feel that satire is the most powerful tool? What about satire is the most powerful tool to cutting through and when you want to unpack these, you know, difficult subjects such as colonialism, identity, and reparations?
Because I think tackling these issues are challenging. Okay.
Right.
So there has to be. So if you look at the British Museum experience, the video,
right,
it was done in a fun, loving way. But at the same time, there were some truths.
Right.
Yeah. So when the president went into the museum, he knew what he wanted to do. He knew that the idea was to go in there and take those things away.
Right.
The idea was to interact with people. The idea was to talk to a white person and say, what do you know about this?
Right.
And I felt the pain, because I'd woken up and I realized
right,
these things were stolen from us, stolen from Africa. Yeah. So my response to your question is, satire for me is, it's comedy that speaks the truth.
right.
It makes you think. You laugh and then you think. It's amazing how impactful that video has been, because it's awakening people who weren't aware of these issues in the first place. But there are, and I'm actually very surprised. And it's more, if I think, it's really interesting. When I did the analysis, thinking about it, the people who have responded to the video in a very positive light are the younger generation people.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which goes to show that you guys are more aware of what happened in Africa.
Right.
Like your parents were.
Right.
You're the guys who are offended.
Right.
You're more offended about what happened. So in my way, because it's such a challenging, we have to find a way of having fun when you deliver something really serious. So yes, some people will find it funny and say, oh yeah, he went in there and tried to, because some people were focusing on, is the way he said it, is the way the president said it. I'm taking it away but actually They're not thinking about, my God, these are things, and actually, those things that I wanted to take away, or the president wanted to take away, are not real. Those are not the real ones.
Mm,
Do you understand what I'm saying?
right,
They're
right.
fake. And I think there's just something really moving as a Black person to go into a museum. It's something for those of you who ever watch this. I would recommend it. Go in. Tell me how you feel when you go into a museum and you see artifacts. It's a very emotional experience.
Yeah.
I felt pain.
Wow.
I felt a connection.
Wow.
I had flashbacks in terms of what were these people? How did they take these things from us? Why did
Exactly.
we let
Yeah.
them take it from
Yeah.
us?
Right. Right. Right.
I,
Right.
I, I, I'm not exaggerating. I felt like I smelled death in the museum
Yeah. Oh, there you
because
go.
yeah, because the number of people who would have fought for those things not to be taken away from them.
Wow.
Yeah, so I would honestly recommend if there's any key message I leave behind for your viewers, they should go to a museum. It is it's an emotional experience.
And that was gonna be my next question in regards to what is your actual message you want to get across. But but before I go there, I want to just quickly ask in regards to your, reaction from people and just everything that you do, specifically with the museum skits. I want to know the reactions that strike you the most. As someone who also does my fair share of trying to push a message on the internet, I know the reactions from people are actually the ones that awaken you the most. And I'll just give you an example. You may get a reaction from an African of actual anger, and you're thinking, and it's so shocking to see that he's actually angry on behalf of his master, that you're even touching the topic. And you would think that themselves, the European themselves, would be more angry. He has actually become more angry, on behalf of the Europeans. And so there's so many, reactions that you get that make you go to bed at night and think to yourself, wow, what does this mean? In regards to what you've done, what reactions have stood out to you the most? I'm sure you've gotten some quotes or on either side from the British themselves and even from Africans. Please start with, let's say, the Africans, your
So
fellow brothers and sisters.
I think for me, it's how emotional people felt about seeing that video and how
Mm,
touching it was for them. They felt a connection. And some people were angry, some people laughed, some people understood the message. I think for me it was the emotions. It was the raw emotions
right,
and the anger.
right,
And for me, that was a good message to put across there, just to make
right,
people realize that look, you might be living abroad, you might be doing well as a Black person.
right, right,
However, make sure you know your roots. Make sure you
right,
understand. Don't get too carried away. Don't get too carried away. But for me,
right.
it was more the emotions. And also the other point to make as well is, do you know it wasn't just Black people who were writing to me. There were white people coming to me and talking to me to say,
Yeah,
"Wow, well done."
really? Well,
Yes.
there. In fairness, I have to say, I
Yes.
started off quite radical myself, and when you see how many white people are able to be understanding and empathetic, it gives you a new perspective. You do know a lot of them can't be, but the ones who can exhibit a very, very spectacular skill.
I was surprised because no, it's not that when I went in there, I thought, oh, more Black people. I just did it because I felt I needed to do it. But I was taken aback by the number of white people who wrote to me saying, "Oh my
Wow,
God, well done. Keep up your good work. I love what you do.
wow,
I love your
wow,
satire. I love the fact that you're bringing this message across in your platform, and you don't know how powerful this is." So I was taken aback by that, um, because I just thought, it's a Black thing, and it's Black people who will respond rather than white people. But but actually, you got white people going into the museum. There was a guy I
yeah,
spoke to in there who knew when those artifacts were stolen
right.
and gave a date of when they were stolen, how they were stolen. So if a white person has that history and knows that history, what is the excuse for a Black person?
Yep,
We must know our history.
yep.
We have to. because that's what defines us.
Yeah.
And that's what moves us forward. We need to stop pretending that we are what we are not, if that makes sense. We must understand our history, understand our roots. So yeah, it was enlightening. I'm gonna go back there with the president, but I'm just planning the next skit, but I'll go back there. I'll go back there.
At PAL, we often say that culture is capital. Do you
Yeah.
believe reclaiming our narrative through art, humor, and storytelling can truly shift global dynamic power?
We've got no choice. We have no choice. Okay, so I made fun of Wakanda as an example.
Right.
Yeah, Black Panther. Yeah, when Black Panther came out, and at that time I didn't really understand. I just thought, why do they have fake accents? But actually, that's not the message, is it? The message is about us controlling our narrative. We want to see Black producers. We want to see producers producing African narratives in their own way, not produced by Hollywood. Do you get what I'm saying? And so that was really powerful. And I've been to so many um, events. We have to control our narrative. I jokingly said, President Obonjo jokingly said a few weeks ago that we need our own African Twitter. We need our own African Google. We need our own African AI. Yeah. Because when you think about it, if you use one of these AIs, for example, it's all stuff that they've picked up from a white narrative, not a black narrative, an African narrative. I don't think people understand the impact. So, in my view, you genuinely need to have spaces where it's our narrative, and it's happening. It is happening, and it continues to happen. So, yeah, it's great that we're able to see this. We're able to see that we're breaking down those barriers because don't raise your children on William Shakespeare, for example. Raise your children reading Chinua Achebe. How many people know Chinua Achebe? Things Fall Apart. Is as good as William Shakespeare.
I've heard about him before. I've come across him
Yeah.
before.
I,
I'm
I'll
yet
give
to
you. I'll
read
give you
him
another.
properly.
I'll give you another example.
Please.
There used to be someone called Fela, Nicola Koputi.
Okay.
Yeah. Long before Burna Boy. This guy. Google him. Yeah. He was an Afro. I won't call him Afro beats, but he was a radical musician who ensured that his message, his music,
Yes.
criticized what was happening in Nigeria.
Yes.
He had a shrine where people went there to listen to his music and smoke weed. Yeah. I had mates who used to go there. My father would not let me go there. I had no appreciation for Fela when I was in Nigeria. And then
Right.
I arrive in England and I hear white people appreciating Fela. Because I was raised listening to Shalamar, Michael
Wow.
Jackson.
Wow.
Yeah. And I arrive in England and white people are listening to Fela and Nicola Koputi and singing and dancing. And I couldn't even sing any of his songs.
Wow.
That was a rude awakening. Do you get so it's been a long time coming. It was good
Yeah.
I came to England. England woke me up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, and even regards to rebuilding, like you're just saying there, like how we want to move in a direction where enlightening ourselves and coming to this place where we want to restore Africa. There are so many ideas that each person have in regards to restoration, right? Because obviously everything that we're doing here is towards a goal. In your eyes, when we think about the topic of reparations, when we think about the topic of restoration of Africa, what does that look like? So all that we're putting ourselves into, yourself, what does that finish line look like for you? Not even necessarily the finish line, but even closer to the finish line. What does reparations look like to you?
In my view, there should be, Donald Trump, and I'm not joking, talks about
Yes.
tariffs. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But every single country in the West that colonized African countries, there should be a repatriation tax.
Right.
We tax them. Yeah, that's point number
Right.
one. Point number two, we want those artifacts back in Africa. It's really important. We want those artifacts back in Africa. That's where they belong. Um, and it's no coincidence that they're having troubles in the West. And because I'm a spiritual person, some of these artifacts are spiritual to Africa. They don't belong in a foreign land. So when a country can't find peace and the country can't move forward, hello, I won't say any more than that. But it's not just about, uh, in my view, the vision is that what we should have is I want to see Africa united. You know, it's such a wonderful continent. And at the moment, it's divided. You know, well, let's take Ibrahim Traore as an example, okay? And he took over about 2-3 years ago as president. And as you know, the Western African countries are setting up their own kind of, like when I say West African, the French West African countries are setting up their own economic organization. And they're doing wonderful things in terms of what's happening with France and so on and so forth. But there is a division because there is a view that the civilian presidents, the ones who are not military presidents, are unhappy with these new military leaders. We can't effectively, in my view, have a united Africa until we have the right people in place. We need the Gaddafis. We need the Nkrumahs. A lot of the African leaders that we've got at the moment are not really African leaders. They're African puppets. They have been placed there by the West. So we need to find a way of replacing them with the Gaddafis, the Nkrumahs. You know, because that's where, you know, the Nkrumahs of this world, that's what, independence. When countries were fighting for independence, that's where the Pan-African thing came. But for one reason or the other, there's been no unity. It's ridiculous, for example, that Ibrahim Traore has had so many assassination attempts, but also they're basically saying that he's a dictator.
Yeah. Well, that was inevitable. That was inevitable. I was waiting for that one, actually.
Yeah, and that was also not that he inspired me, but I did my research and I just noticed. Have you noticed that a lot of the African leaders that they call dictators previously were when I say working very closely, they got on well with the West.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they realized, because they woke up and realized that the West was just the IMF, the World Bank, and all these other Western governments were just not doing what they were supposed to do for Africa.
Yeah.
They fell out with them. You go and have a read or watch a video, Idi Amin Dada of Uganda. The things that he said are still relevant today about Pan-Africanism.
Wow.
Listen to Mugabe. The things he said are still very relevant.
One of my favorite.
Yeah. The number of African leaders that have been assassinated by the West because they wanted the united Africa. They wanted to focus on Africa rather than the influence with the West. So many of them. So that's my vision. My vision is that we have so many Gaddafis in Africa.
Yeah.
But you could argue we have so many Obonjos in Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
We have many Traores in Africa.
Yeah.
And they're all united and they're focused. Because let me tell you this much. If Donald Trump can say, make America great, and we don't want to trade with, or if we're going to trade, we're going to be, you know, he's just basically saying globalization has failed.
Yeah.
What is wrong in Africa? Closing its borders and uniting. Because Africa is rich enough.
Yeah.
We just lack the leadership.
Yeah. You know, I think that's probably one of the best answers I've heard. It's a perfect answer because I think, like you just said there, to add to it, it's not only the united Africa, you know, in terms of the continent, but we're realizing now that it had to be a united Africa, even psychologically, from the diaspora and from everyone worldwide. When you have conversations amongst ourselves, you do see that the reasons why we are unable to unite on such a, I want to say, institutional level, on a global level like that, because they have poisoned how we feel about each other, how we feel about ourselves. Like you said earlier today, a hairstyle of your own people, you were hoping your son would remove the hairstyle until you're reminded how you were made to feel about yourself. You said your father, made put British culture above your own culture, and that was how he felt about his own culture. So I think
Yeah.
when we're doing things like what you're doing, it's breaking down, it's removing the scales off of our eyes, and then we're actually coming to a place where we love ourselves again. We want to unite, and Trump can ride that wave where he just says, "Make America great again." He says, "I love America," and that love for America really, although it's an imperial love, it really seeps to the bottom of their stomach, right? And it speaks to the people.
Yeah, he speaks to the people, and we don't have to copy what Donald Trump is doing. But if he wants to
Definitely.
love America and he's American, he's entitled to do that. What I want is for Africans to love Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah, African products. Yeah, African goods.
Definitely.
Yeah, when you wake up in the morning and you decide, I don't know, wherever you live, and you're going to a coffee shop. Yeah, you go to a coffee shop, but who runs that coffee shop?
Exactly.
Yeah, because there are some other parts of the world where they make sure. So I give an example. I remember going to a Chinese restaurant, and I jokingly said, because my creativity just someone was celebrating their birthday party, and I saw all this rice, fried rice, whatever rice, and all that stuff. So I jokingly asked the the restaurant owner. I said, I want to put a complaint in. How come you're not serving jollof rice? And then he said, what is jollof rice? I said, okay, I'm African. I know what Chinese rice is. I know what
There you
fried rice is. I know what you
go.
put in your fried rice. You don't know what jollof rice is?
Come on.
But it was a joke. But that was another rude awakening.
There you go.
Why would
Isn't
I
it?
wake up?
Wow.
Yeah, why can't I just go into a Nigerian restaurant and have something to eat in a Nigerian restaurant?
Wow.
Why? Because you will never see, I've never seen, I might be wrong, but in London, I've never seen a Chinese man go into a Nigerian restaurant. But you will see Nigerians go into a Chinese restaurant.
Wow.
Yeah? What's the difference between jollof rice and fried rice? It's just the ingredients. So, there's a lot. There's a lot that this is not going to happen overnight. But what I'm glad about is the fact that people are aware, those who aren't are waking up, and they're aware of their culture, their identity, and we've got to do something about it. But it's not just down to President Obonjo, it's not down to you, it's down to every individual. Every individual. You don't even have to have a big platform. It could be just something we're interacting with, or when you have conversations with people. We need, because they're protecting their own, and we got to do the same.
Definitely. Wow. And finally, for the young creatives and activists out there who want to use humor to spark real world change, Benjamin, sir, what advice would you give to them before we get Mr. President on the show today?
So I would start by saying writing is very important. Write every day. You have to write and write and write every day as a creative. I would also say, think about what you're writing.
Right.
Think about the impact of what you say on stage. Think about who's listening. What difference can you actually make? So if you're a comedian, yeah, great, you can tell jokes, but what impact is it having? And I think for me, as a Black comic, there's added, it's not pressure, but I think you have more of a responsibility to be more responsible in how you deliver the message.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I can say pressure too. You can say pressure.
Yeah. You could say pressure too. Because I how would I put it? I used to watch a lot of American comedy, okay? And I used to watch the likes of Chris Rock and all these other comics, and they use the N-word. Nigga this, nigga that, nigga this, Actually, after a while, I stopped enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I just thought, I'm not getting it. This is not impactful in any shape or form. This is just, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I'd rather have comedy that is intellectual, comedy that makes me think.
Yeah.
Before I laugh. I don't want to be making fun of women. Yeah. What do you understand what I'm saying? As an example. Yes. And don't get me wrong. There's a market for that kind of comedy, and that's what they want to do. That's fine. And people want to watch it. That's fine. They want to have fun and be reminded about their lives. That's great. But I genuinely think as a black comic, you have a responsibility
100%.
to be impactful in what you say. Once you have that mic is very powerful.
Yeah.
And whatever you say has an impact. I mean, the number of people who come to me. So as the president, because the president has a life of its own now, it's become, his life doesn't end on stage. So for example, before you, we had this session today, I checked Twitter just to have a look at what was happening on Twitter. And unbelievable. A video that went on at, I think it was 2 days ago, dressed in uniform as President Obonjo, and just talking about Ibrahim Traore and the assassinations and the fact that we need to protect Ibrahim and Africa needs to unite behind him. I'm not joking. It's had 300,000 views.
Wow.
And well over 500 retweets.
Wow.
Who are the people retweeting it?
Wow.
People from Africa.
Yeah. Nice.
And people who are, this is what's really interesting. There's almost like the young people in Africa have decided that democracy has failed. And the only way to bring any country forward is military dictatorship.
Right.
Rightly or wrongly, depending on what you believe. But what I do believe is this. Before we were colonized, we had our own way of governing ourselves.
Yes. I believe that's
true,
sir.
Yeah, and in my view, that's where we need to get back to, because democracy is like a bad kidney transplant. It's not working in Africa, nowhere in Africa. But I have been taken aback by the number of people. I'm sure if I check now, it's gone for it's more than that. People want a change. They want change, and I'm not talking about Obama's change that we believe in. They want real change, an impactful change. And a lot of young people write to me since that video came out, basically, thank you, Mr. President. Even though I'm not a president, they believe I am a president. Thank you, Mr. President. So, yeah. I'm sorry I'm laughing. It's just literally funny.
I'm laughing.
It's just literally funny. So yeah. So if you're creative, just write, perform, but understand what is your message. What are you putting out there?
Yeah. Because
that is really, really important. I love to listen to creatives who have a lasting impact. It makes me think. I think it's almost like reading. You read a book and it has an impact on you. That's what creatives need to do on stage. Either you're a poet, or you're a comedian, or you're a motivational speaker, whatever it is.
Amazing. Benjamin Bankole Bello. Help me pronounce that again.
Bankole.
Benjamin
Do you know what Bankole means?
What does it
Bankole means?
Tell me.
It means build a house.
Wow.
And it's so interesting because what I thought about this. So when my father had me, he was building a house.
Wow.
That's why they called me Bankole.
Wow.
So and that
I love that.
There has to be a meaning. There has to be a meaning to a name.
Yes.
Yeah? There has to be a meaning to a name. It's like Kemi. Oluwa Kemi.
What does that mean?
God protects me.
Wow.
God protects me. Oluwa Kemi.
Wow.
I'm actually quite pleased that she didn't change her name from Kemi to Mary. So that Kemi is still there.
We'll give her a mark for that.
We give her a mark for but she's
Bankole Bello, thank you so much. Time for us to get to Mr. President. I'm itching to get Mr. President out now, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. And to our global Pal Nation, thank you so much for tuning in. Please, please, please keep the conversation alive. We want to hear your voice. Let us know what part of today's conversation sparked new thinking, new pride, and new action. I've been your host, Harrison Paul. Thank you so much.
Living a dream, living the African dream.